Welcome to the Central Bank of Kuwait's podcast. This podcast aims to present the most important banking topics affecting us as people and as a society. I am Mariam Lumkhayzim from the Central Bank of Kuwait. In this episode, we are going to discuss an important topic because it relates to all aspects of our daily life as we become increasingly reliant on technology, especially over the past few years. Our topic today is information security and cybersecurity. This field has gained increased importance during COVID-19 pandemic as a result of our unprecedented level of reliance on electronic financial transactions. Today we have Maha Al-Hazza from the Central Bank of Kuwait to cast light on information security and cybersecurity and its applications, its role in our lives in general and in the Central Bank of Kuwait in particular. Let's start, Maha, with a simple definition of cybersecurity.
Thanks, Mariam, for having me on this podcast. As everybody knows, with the technological progress and its role in preservation and circulation of information and its importance in facilitating the transactions of individuals and institutions, the need has increased to maintain the security of this information and restrict access to it and ensure the completion of electronic transactions confidentially and safely. This is the role of cybersecurity, which in this case is responsible for protecting electronic borders. As for the scientific definition, let me start with defining information security because it is the concept that is closely related to cybersecurity. Information can take different forms, written, oral, and digital. As such, information security is a set of procedures and practices that have three main objectives: information confidentiality, information integrity, information availability. As you know, Mariam, since storing, transferring, and processing information in most cases are carried out digitally through electronic systems, applications, devices, and networks, in other words, through a digital infrastructure, the role of cybersecurity is to maintain the security and integrity of this infrastructure and protect it from any attack vector.
Would you elaborate on the three objectives of information security?
Sure. Let me start with confidentiality. It's the control of access to information and confining access to authorized persons only. As for information integrity, it's preserving and protecting information from intrusion, theft, alteration, or loss. Finally, the availability of information means the readiness and availability of systems and information to authorized parties whenever needed.
Now that we have defined cybersecurity and information security, we would like to know how cybersecurity is achieved.
In its essence, cybersecurity is the practice of risk assessment.
What kind of risks?
Risks may take many forms, Mariam, including cyber attacks to commit information or identity theft, infiltrating for extortion, fraud, or disrupting services, and many other risks.
And these are cyber crimes, of course, Maha.
You're absolutely right. These are crimes that occur in cyberspace, and because they are crimes, they are punishable by law.
Excellent. We would like to know the role of the Central Bank of Kuwait in achieving cybersecurity for both the central bank and the Kuwaiti banking sector.
Well, the Central Bank of Kuwait, as an institution that has information assets and its own infrastructure, it's imperative to provide cybersecurity to the institution itself. Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Kuwait is the regulator for more than 90 entities providing banking and financial services, such as banks, exchange companies, finance and investment companies, payment companies, and financial technology companies known as fintechs, as well as KNET and SINET. And it's also essential to ensure the cybersecurity of the entire financial sector. Therefore, the answer must touch upon these two aspects. At the level of the Central Bank of Kuwait as an institution, cybersecurity is achieved through numerous periodic procedures to assess security threats to information assets and the infrastructure, and following up the application of needful security measures. Examples of such procedures are Vulnerability Assessment and Penetration Testing Report. The penetration testing is periodically conducted by a team specializing in cybersecurity. This test is a simulation of realistic attacks and attempt to achieve a specific goal, such as information theft or sabotage or other risks. Meanwhile, the vulnerability assessment is important to detect vulnerabilities and ensure the effectiveness of the security controls followed. In this regard, it is important to emphasize that the Central Bank of Kuwait applies the highest international standards in the field of information security and cybersecurity. For instance, we have obtained the ISO 27001 International Information Security Standard Certificate at the Central Bank of Kuwait since 2020, and we are keen to renew it annually, as well as compliance with the SWIFT Customer Security Program since 2017. On the other hand, the role of the Central Bank of Kuwait in the cybersecurity of its regulated entities is to exercise its mandate to ensure that regulated entities apply the highest standards and the best practices in cybersecurity. One of the most important measures taken by the Central Bank in this field, Maryam, is establishing and implementing the cybersecurity framework for the Kuwaiti banking sector in February 2020 with the aim of achieving cyber resilience for the banking sector. This strategic framework is a part of the government's efforts in this field, embodied in the National Cybersecurity Strategy for the State of Kuwait.
You mentioned earlier, Meha, the concept of cyber resilience as one of the goals of cybersecurity. Would you further explain this concept?
The Financial Stability Board, or the FSB, in Switzerland defines cyber resilience as the ability of an organization to continue to carry out its mission by anticipating and adapting to cyber threats and other relevant changes in the environment, and by withstanding, containing, and rapidly recovering from cyber incidents.
We've discussed the role of Central Bank of Kuwait in cybersecurity as an institution and regulator. But is cybersecurity limited to institutions only? Isn't there any role for individuals?
Individuals' awareness is essential in this context. Protecting individuals' banking and financial information is a shared responsibility, Maryam, especially with the increase in fraud attempts targeting individuals to disclose their banking information. Therefore, the Central Bank of Kuwait launched a media awareness campaign that is still in place since the beginning of 2021, which included messages and recommendations for bank customers on how to protect their bank credentials and other confidential information. These messages are available on the campaign's website and social media platforms of the Central Bank of Kuwait and the participating Kuwaiti banks.
Our conversation on cybersecurity may catch the interest of many listeners who may be considering a career in cybersecurity. What would you tell them, Meha, in this regard?
Cybersecurity has gone beyond being a promising specialization. According to many international studies and statistics, it is one of the most sought-after specialties, at a rate exceeding other jobs. That explains the interest of many local and international academic institutes to incorporate cybersecurity in their programs. It's worth mentioning that Kafa'a initiative, which is led by the Central Bank of Kuwait in cooperation with Kuwaiti banks and managed by the Institute of Banking Studies, offers a specialized program for cybersecurity leaders due to the need of highly skilled experts in cybersecurity.
Thank you, Meha Hazza, for this informative discussion on cybersecurity and information security. And thanks to our listeners for joining us on this episode. This is Maryam Lumkhayzim from the Central Bank of Kuwait's podcast.